How often do we pause and ask, what part of me is really making this choice? Is it the part that's fearful, conditioned, or trying to keep me safe? Or is it the part that knows, the higher self, that wise presence that sees beyond circumstance? And listeners, today we are diving into that space between thought and truth. Welcome back, listeners, to the Cosmic Confluence podcast, where we explore the hidden architecture of consciousness, intuition, and multidimensional living. I'm your host, Sana, and in this episode, we are tapping into elevated awareness, not as a vague spiritual idea, but as a real, embodied state we can access at will. And joining me is Daphne Michaels. She is a human potential expert, best-selling author, and ultra consciousness guide whose work has been endorsed by some of the most influential voices in the human development space. From psychotherapy and then energetic anatomy to leadership coaching and radio. Listeners, Daphne's journey is a bridge between science, soul, and higher frequencies. So the question is, can we really live as our higher self every day? Or is it something we only glimpse in fleeting moments of stillness or surrender? Let's find out. So, Daphne, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here as well.
Okay, so Daphne, before we explore your journey, I think our listeners will be really, really curious to know what does it actually look like or mean to live as your higher self? Is it something like super enlightened state of our minds or our soul or something else?
It is. It's everything really. So the way that I would say it is when we live as our higher self, we are bringing through who we're meant to be
Mhm.
with the innocence of who we were as a child.
Mm, wow. Because, a lot of people think of the higher self as this far away, untouchable version of them. Like one day I'll be like this, or maybe. But you connect it with our inner child, that innocence, that non-judgmental, belief, which is accessible, which is present. So, why do you believe, Daphne, that there's a gap, between um, this thought around higher selves and then the actual way, let's say, considering your way of defining it?
There's actually not a gap. I mean, it's there.
Mhm.
The problem is that we haven't grown into it yet. So I think our higher self is a spiritual developmental process, just like all of our other developmental processes. We learn to talk, we learn to walk, we learn to socialize, we learn everything about life. And nothing really is there at the beginning when we're born. We're kind of a blank slate. So there is something that happens though. And what happens is that in learning to walk and talk and be and socialize and we end up losing a lot of ourself in that process. And that is what's called the ego forming. So the ego forms to actually protect our higher self so that we don't injure our higher self. So what happens is the ego is just a lot of defensiveness. It's a defense structure that allows us to succeed in a broken world. And because we have this defense structure, it actually arrests our spiritual development. So, for those of us who want to develop our higher self, we have to get back onto the path of developing our higher self and embodying it and learning to live in a complex world from this enlightened state of mind.
That is very well explained, Daphne. Really very well. Because I could actually understand because, once again, people have this idea about higher selves that, only gurus or spiritually enlightened people only can get to it. But it is something which is already there within us. Just
Absolutely.
a protective layer surrounding it, like, the onion peels or the layers.
Exactly. The only reason that gurus have gotten there is because they've gone through some kind of radical process to let go of the ego and embody their higher self. And sometimes that process is in a moment of conversion. Like some people have these experiences. I actually had that experience when I was young. It was a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, and it was spontaneous. But a lot of people get there because they don't want to feel like they're in pain anymore and they don't want to live with the limitations. And they know in their heart that life can be so much more. So they start on a path and they work with coaches or personal development. But at some point, they tap into something beyond. And when they tap into something beyond, now they're on the wave of their higher self embodying.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and Daphne, as you shared about your spiritual awakening and experiences, there's something that, when I was reading your intro, it mentioned about energetic anatomy. Now, we have talked about, and we have studied a bit about the physical anatomy or the biological, the cellular anatomy and all. But uh, what exactly is the simplest way to understand, that how our energy system, how it's deeply connected in, with our decision making or awareness or the way we behave or think?
That's a great question. And this actually took me years and years and years to figure out because when I had my spiritual awakening, it was spontaneous and I did not know anything about what was happening. So I started on a path to try to understand. And anything that had to do with shifting the frequency in the body seemed to be part of the equation. So, for instance, I tried just about everything. I tried different diets. I tried, because this is what happened. When I had my spiritual awakening, I went into a very, very high state of consciousness and a very high frequency. But
Mm,
I could not hold that in daily life because
mhm,
daily life does not allow people to hold that state of consciousness. And the reason is because of the vibration of daily life. It vibrates too low. So if you want to fit in and live like in ordinary consciousness, until very recently, you had to lower your vibration to even connect. So that was a very big puzzle to me. So I was on a path to figure out what happened to me and what this was that I experienced. And everything kept coming back to vibration, frequency, and embodiment. So, for instance, acupuncture, that is a
mhm,
vibrational medicine. That is going to open up pathways. So the light can actually get through the pathways of eating a certain diet, that opens up pathways to a higher vibration. But I will say something that is, I'm sure, second nature to you and much newer in our country, which is the chakra system. So the more I learned about Ayurvedic medicine, the Vedic texts, and Eastern spirituality, the more I understood that there is an anatomy and it is quantum, meaning energetic. And this anatomy is very clearly, um, it's very clearly in potential in our being. And the reason I say in potential is because it doesn't count if we don't activate it. But if we do activate it and we work with it, then it is there for us. So the energetic anatomy is is where we go when we meditate. We're turning on that switch and we're shifting from a physical being to an energetic being. When
Mm.
when we have spiritual practices, we're shifting from a physical being to an energetic being. And so those of us who can see energetically, who can perceive energetically, can very easily perceive the light coming out of somebody when they have flipped that switch and now they're living energetically, they're living as a light body, they're living as a spirit embodied.
Wow. And Daphne, I would love to know from you. So this itself speaks um, volumes of how two polar opposite worlds, science and then soul, they're intersecting. Because it's kind of merging the concepts here. We are merging medicine with the soul, um, with something as intangible as energy. In fact, until some point of time in the history, people didn't even believe in energy or soul, that we have something, some kind of energy or light within us. Then there were experiments, where water was said to have its own conscious, or, when it kind of attracts the negative energy, it kind of um, has a different way of portraying it. But then there is positivity around it. Then the water is more pure, and it's pristine, it's clear. So I think it's a beautiful example of this intersection between science and soul.
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, the, um, the person who wrote the book Power versus Force, his name
Mhm.
was David Hawkins, and he came up with a system called kinesiological calibrations, and that for
Mhm.
many people, they would recognize as muscle testing. And basically, he came up with a model that really looked at levels of consciousness that people were carrying. And the model went from 0 to 1,000. And I had a conversation with him one day, and I said to him, I said, "Your work is really finding that bridge between science and spirituality." And he said, "Yes, and that resonates at 700." So, what that meant to me is that we can't even get into the realm where we understand that science and spirituality have a natural bridge until we are ourselves in a heightened state of consciousness. And when we're in a heightened state of consciousness, all of a sudden it makes sense that the science that they're coming out with more and more and more, because there's more experiments being done about people who do consciousness work. And what spirituality has been telling us for 5,000 years, they're coming together seamlessly now. This is an extremely exciting time.
Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, okay. And Daphne, um, was this a result of any you know personal transformative event in your life? Or I mean, because sometimes we initially we don't believe in something, but some kind of life changing event happens with us, and we kind of question our own thought process or belief system. Was there any transformative event as such, or is this something? Mhm.
Yeah, I look at it, I mean, I've looked at it so many times and I've thought, "Why and how and what?" And so I think there's several things. One is that I was raised in nature. I was super lucky to be raised on acreage. So, um, when I went outside and played, there was nobody there other than me and the trees and my siblings. So, being that close to nature as a child, I think put me into that resonance of
Mhm.
connection to unity consciousness. So that was natural to me as a child. However, the more that I grew up, and even in my own home, there was a lot of conflict and a lot of, tension, and I'm not blaming anyone because it wasn't just my home, it was everybody's home, and so I think I became heartbroken at an early age that nature and the natural world was so pure and so beautiful, but the world of ordinary life wasn't, and so I think my psyche was trying to figure that out, and then when
Mhm.
I became, a young adult and started off on my own, I just think the tension was too great. The more I think I was afraid to go out into the world because I would
Mhm.
lose my spirit,
Mhm.
and so and I don't think I had as much of a developed ego structure because I was in nature all the time. So I think it was just a perfect storm, and it resolved by my consciousness moving to a very high vibration when I was under starlight. And I think the vibration of the light and the vibration of the stars and the vibration of the universe just took me there. And that was my spiritual experience, and it became extremely clear to me in that moment that there's 2 worlds, that we don't have 1 world. We have a mystical world that's connected to everything, and then we
Mhm.
have the world that we've created as human beings, which is incredibly small, incredibly cruel in a lot of ways, and
Mhm.
just not right. So that started me on my path to figure out how can I not lose track of the truth and live what I know.
Wow, that is so empowering, definitely. Really, really empowering. And definitely this needs a lot of clarity, strength, confidence, resilience. There's a lot of heavy words, but I believe, um, you have really beautifully shared it. Um,
Thank you.
so, Daphne, before we wrap up, um, if our listeners, for someone who wants a practical entry point, how do we know when we are not operating from our higher self? Like, any checkpoint or any simple daily anchor that brings us back?
Yeah, there's a couple that I think will be super helpful. And one of them is to say, how would love act right now? Right? Because the thing is, when we get into elevated frequencies, we are in the bandwidth of love. It's not just a blank state of mind. It is an entire universe of love. And so I think we need to hold the intention to be connected to love. and to be a representation of love in our life, of purity, purity of heart. And one of the ways that I think is great to get there is just paying attention to the sunrise in the morning. For those of you who want to be on a spiritual path, if you want to transform your world, your life, then you can start that by just being with the sun when it comes up and resonating to the sunlight, knowing that you are part of the bigger, grander experience of the universe, and starting to let go of that little tiny world that we've created and be part of expanding it for everyone.
Wow, that's such a beautiful one, and I think it is more and more needed in today's day and age because most of our times we spend in workplaces, inside buildings, or in our homes. But it's physically, emotionally, spiritually so good, and it feels like liberating to kind of view and also feel the sunrise.
I think it's the task of our times. I think we're ready as a humanity to begin the developmental process to become what I call a cosmic being, somebody who lives in this expanded awareness of this incredible life we have and bring a new vibration into the world.
Totally, totally. Great. So, definitely for listeners, they would like to connect with you. What will be the best way?
My website, daphne michaels.com. And there is a free event that I
Mm.
do often. And it's where we basically work with the energy, figure out where the energy blocks are, and try to unblock those so that people can get a little elevation to start their journey.
Wonderful. That's generous, Daphne. I'll make sure to have all the links and details in the show notes. And this was such a beautiful uh, conversation, Daphne, because you have reminded us that tapping into our higher self, it isn't reserved for monks on mountain tops or seekers in retreat. It's available to all of us in the pause, maybe in sunrise, in the breath, or in the quiet whispers of our intuition, that inner voice within us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been a delightful conversation, and I'm so excited about what you're doing. Thank you for spreading the word.
Very kind and encouraging words. And to all the beautiful listeners out there, if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to sit with it, re listen, reflect, and most importantly, practice. This is Cosmic Confluence, and I am Sana. Until next time, keep walking toward the truth of who you are, not the loudest version, but the most luminous. Thank you.